This week, I learned the ways of the samurai.
And I try to explain how the only thing missing is just a little bit of hip hop. Hi, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Garrett, and we watch anime.
This is a great, highly anticipated episode for me, Garrett, because for me, this was one of the anime that really got me excited about where this anime medium could be taken, especially with how artistic and how unabashedly Japanese it is. However, what I was noticing when I was rewatching it this week was the idea that for you, someone who's trying it new, who doesn't have the experience with Japanese history, probably doesn't have as much of the tropes that I'm used to, that it might be something to get lost in the ether. So this might be the first time in the course of this podcast in which our views on it stretch very differently, which I'm really excited to hear about. To start, what did you think about the show that we talked about this week, which is Samurai Champloo?
Samurai Champloo. It was awesome. So last week we spoke about the Prince of Tennis, sports anime, pretty superficial stuff, very formulaic, serves a purpose, doesn't really scratch the surface of the human condition.
Right.
This week we talked Samurai Champloo, and there are a lot of themes going on at the same time. There are personal journeys, there's friendships, there's loyalties, there's really a lot of depth. In the beginning, I was kind of thrown for a loop. They really play with time. So it's set in like the Edo period of Japan.
Yes, I'll get into more of that stuff later as we go.
But there's certainly things that don't belong there. And the entire time I'm thinking, what is the word to describe something like this? And then the lead female says, "Why are you being so anachronistic?" And I'm like, that's the word.
That's a GRE word that we're going to be using a lot. So when you out there listen to the word anachronistic or an anachronism, it means something taken out of time. I know this because I took the GREs, and that was one of the words I had to learn. So
when I looked it up, it said most commonly when you're watching something, it is an item placed out of time.
Right,
For example, if you're watching something about samurai and someone pulls out a cell phone, that's not what happened here.
Right.
But that would be anachronistic.
Right, exactly. And I would say that it's a reimagination of the Edo period, without actually making it ridiculous, right? So to start, for those who are listening out there, I'll give you a brief explanation about the anime of Samurai Champloo. So Samurai Champloo, for me, because I think it's just as important this week that I talk about my journey with this one, because you got to watch it in the comfort of your home, off of a streaming site that you got to appreciate and enjoy and watch at your leisure. Mm-hmm. Your boy Garrett had to be a little bit of a pirate when he first watched this. I remember Full Speed, just so you kind of get also a little more context, that I was introduced to the idea of Samurai Champloo not because of Adult Swim like most people would, but because the artistic director was the same one who did the anime set piece for Kill Bill. And I remember Kill Bill was one of those movies like Reservoir Dogs, like that every college student circa early to mid 2000s had to watch. And there was a scene where they explained the history of Oda and Ishii, which is the character that Lucy Liu plays in Kill Bill. And because it was so violent, they had to change it to an anime to do it.
That softened it.
Exactly. And also they did a lot of other things to make it so they didn't get the NC-17 rating, like the part that's really violent, they make black and white so you don't see as much blood. Those kind of tricks were used so that it wouldn't get an NC-17 rating. But I remember being struck by how beautiful the art was. And my buddy, who's sitting next to me watching the movie, goes, "You think that's good? Apparently they're writing an anime. The same people who did this is going to be doing Samurai Champloo." And I had to watch it because it was just cool. It was slick. The art was very, like, you could see there's like distortions. Like, it's very well drawn and everything. And I remember I had to go on your LimeWires and your DC Pluses to get it, but I did it. And I had to do it when the episodes came out because I watched it right as they were coming out.
Mm-hmm. So it came out in 2004, so you were in college, starting college up.
Yep, absolutely. So for me, it was a lot of making sure that I got it as it came in. It was a really cool thing for me to watch. But once again, I don't want my expectations and my feelings of this property to phase you. So for those who haven't watched Samurai Champloo, what's the show about? What are some of the key characters? Let us know what you experienced your first time watching this show.
Right. And so I'll get into the summary a little bit, but one more thing about the history, and I just found this out earlier this weekend as I was reading up leading into the podcast after I'd watched my 6 episodes. I think the artistic director you're talking about is Shinichiro Watanabe.
Wow. Garrett, you're going into Weeb territory. You're learning about art directors. You're learning about...
This was his first anime since he did Cowboy Bebop.
Yep, that's right. I heard that he was the same.
So you're like stirring a big old stew of things that Garrett likes.
Right.
You're like,
and if you noticed, the main characters all have huge Japanified afros. So
yeah, that looks familiar.
Yeah, like Spike looks a lot like Mugen in this character. But I forgot that this was a Cowboy Bebop director piece. So
right. So the show kicks off with this cafe, right? Mm-hmm. And this character Fu, she's a 15-year-old girl. She's a waitress in this cafe, and she's sort of getting bullied by the local governor's son and his gang of losers, essentially.
Right.
And of course, they're someone above them, like their father's in charge, so they're pushing around, they're getting food, they're getting gropey with the girls in the cafe, and this guy Mugen comes in, and he says, "You want me to take care of him? All you gotta do is feed me a certain amount." Kind of gives you that drifter vibe,
right?
And she agrees to it, and he kicks the living crap out of everyone. Actually, ends up cutting off the governor's son's arm.
Right.
Now, at the same time, across town, there is another character, one of the other protagonists, because this show, at least from the first 6 episodes, focuses on a trio of people. So Fu, the 15-year-old girl, Mugen, who's sort of this like vagrant swordsman who's very wild and unpolished, is the polite way of saying it. Well, across town there's this character named Jin. He's this Ronin, this sort of samurai without like a master, right? Mm-hmm. He's over there killing the governor's bodyguards at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. So bad day for the crime and corruption syndicate in whatever town. And so essentially eventually the restaurant she's in burns down. So that goes really poorly.
Yeah.
And these two characters, the two fighters, are introduced to one another, Mugen and Jin.
Yeah.
And immediately they want to fight because they have pride and they just want to be the best swordsman and be the best fighter and take one another out. But Fu gets them to agree. I don't remember how she does this, but gets them to agree they can't kill each other until they help her find the samurai who smells like sunflowers.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the opening set piece before we go on an adventure.
Right. And it's a good like buddy journey comedy drama that I think does really well to break kind of like the period piece, but also adds like these little hip hop flares, which I really appreciated. So just to kind of clarify, the characters were kind of bestowed to Fu because she saved them from getting executed. So
that's right. She breaks him out of jail.
So they're kind of now, but then at some point, like in one of the things that they talk to each other and say bye-bye, and they split and they go full speed in the opposite directions. I thought that was hysterical. Like, the journey ends here.
I also forgot that when she's trying to break them out, they show her running and literally her breasts are like flopping. And I thought, oh my God, episode 1 fan service? This is a little premature. But it was actually grenades stuffed in her robe that she uses to distract the soldiers so that they can get away.
Like, I know they didn't have bras in Edo period Japan, but like they couldn't be that floppy as part of the thing. Yeah, no, they were
just used an ace bandage. Or whatever the equivalent was.
Yeah. So that's a really good synopsis. It's essentially the misadventures of, it's kind of like Cowboy Bebop. It's the misadventures of these 3 vagrants who are going around looking for this one goal, but at the end of doing it, they still got to make money. They still got to like feed themselves. Half of their episodes are like, how are we going to make enough money to get to the next place we need to go?
Right.
And they do it either through like an eating competition in one episode.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they split off and do different things. One becomes a model, the other one plays shogi with another character, and like they somehow always end up together. So no matter how hard they try, they end up with each other back together. So like they try to, as much as they try to shoot themselves back out, they always come back together. So
you know what they kind of remind me of, and you're gonna have to help me with one of the characters' names.
Sure.
There's no romance here.
No.
First of all, Fu is 15 and the other two are like 19 and 20. But it kind of reminded me, she reminded me of Kate Freckles from Lost.
Oh yeah.
Sort of that character that always gets in trouble. Mugen is Sawyer. And then I guess Jin, if Jin was an alcoholic neurosurgeon who cut open a dude's spine, he could be Matthew Fox's character, right? Yeah. What was his name again?
Jack. Yeah. I think so. And I think it's also what's really cool is thematically, like, they're always shown as dichotomies of each other, although they're kind of the same person. So I'm very impressed with you because I thought I had to explain like things like what a Ronin is, what a daimyo is, like what the kind of
do that for the people. No, I only know because now that you've got me sort of immersing myself in this world,
right?
I'm trying to keep my knowledge superficial so as not to ruin the experiment,
right.
But I'm also doing tiny bit of research so that I can sort of speak about it more eloquently. So get into Ronin because basically what is the difference between Mugen being a vagrant swordsman and Jin being a Ronin?
So, gather around, kids. I'm going to tell you a nice little story about Edo period Japan, from 1600 to 1860. So, what is crazy about Japan is that its history is much longer than ours. So, they have periods, much like Van Gogh's life. They have periods, but it was the beginning of different. They usually marked by different emperor families taking over the emperorship, and this one was the Tokugawa family. In this case, it started with Tokugawa Ieyasu, which I'm probably butchered myself because it's a lot of like. It's basically me trying to say all the vowels at once, like A-I-O-U. And like
5 points for effort.
Yeah. Ieyasu. I'm going to write it when we do post, but Ieyasu. And he basically marked this period by several factors. One is that they closed off the country. And that means that save for a very specific people, which we'll talk about by episode 6, no other foreigner was allowed in the country. The second thing that he marked, especially much later in, is that people were not allowed to wear swords in public. So that was kind of started the process of bringing back the samurai ship. It also concentrated power. So there's a lot less power in feudal lords, or the daimyos as they're called. And then this led to, weirdly enough, a lot of economic prosperity. So a lot of times there was a lot more interest in art. So art exploded at that time.
So you mean by not allowing people to run around crazy like 1,000 independent states,
right?
They found a sense of unity and economic prosperity that's insane.
That's correct. And a lot of them, because they weren't killing each other, were allowed leisure time. So that's why all the great stuff that we appreciate about Japan, the nature aesthetic, all the art pieces that we consider to be traditional, that stuff came out of this period because a lot of people had more time on their hands.
They were allowed to focus on it.
Right. And then they a lot of times were like, did you notice how pretty cherry blossoms are? I think I might draw about this.
This past week, I don't know if it came from the Edo period, but I literally watched like 6 hours on YouTube on Japanese carving.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, it was such a prosperous time that there was a lot of economic, stability. There was a lot of, they closed the country, but there's still a specific trade they could do. There's a lot more leisure time, and it lasted all the way up until the 1860s when our good friend, the general from the United States, came in and said, "Open up the borders," and we forced
Tom Cruise?
No, his name is. Oh God, you're gonna make me do. I remember because it's Perry. General Perry. I remember in my head, I did a mnemonic in my head of Matthew Perry from Friends. And I'm like, and so I'm imagining Chandler was like, how could this border be any more closed? Like, that's what I did to remember that it was General Perry who forced the country of Japan to open. So yes, now you got me to do it. This is how I did well in school. I did mnemonics. So basically speaking, that opened up the borders, and that kind of effectively ended the Edo period and went to a different period at that time. But, it's a really cool thing because it showed these episodes a lot of times took their time. So what I appreciate about Samurai Champloo is that it's not like normal anime where like stuff, like a problem happens, then you get the mid card that like explains the show. Like it's not like Full Metal Alchemist, and then like it get resolved. It's so they just took their time. They made a point to like enjoy the aesthetic of the period so that people could really appreciate that. And I thought
the artwork of the TV, the artwork of the show is really, really beautiful and really detailed. And there's just something that seems, it is absolutely an illustrated piece of art. It is a cartoon, but it feels decidedly not cartoonish.
Right, exactly. And I think for most people who watch anime, they understand Dragon Ball Z and everyone going like and like shooting their hair getting big and like episodes lasting like 4 weeks just for people powering up to this is like slow, chill, cool. There's breaks going like and like that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff made it kind of cool. And I remember really appreciating that because like as I told you, I watched this in college, so it wasn't as interesting to watch Dragon Ball Z.
It could have come out yesterday though.
Yeah, it really could have. And the art is really fantastic on this show. So
but I think more than anything, and I don't know if you want to jump ahead to this, the art is fantastic, but the music just lays a vibe on it that is really something else.
I just want to, because when I wrote our show notes today, I wrote a section that said "Dat music dough" because I think, before we get into like the music as it pertains to how like the show had me for music, I first want to talk about how the idea of hip hop plays in the idea of samurai, right? Because I think it's important to acknowledge that this show is pretty period correct in like terms of what was happening at the time, but at the same time, people are beatboxing. There's Mugen is breakdancing. So in your case, as a person who's watched this for the first time, did that work? Right? It did
because honestly, it felt pretty seamless.
Right.
It felt like it fit. Now, obviously, if someone says to me, "Can you point out the thing that doesn't belong here?" I could probably point it out. But the flow, no pun intended, the flow was so good that I was just like, "Yeah, this is how it's supposed to be."
Right, yeah, you're like, there's no reason why they wouldn't have eyebrow piercings in the Edo period of Japan, right? Like, it's really, I agree with you. It is a very seamless show in terms of integrating that idea of hip hop. So just to give you a background, you're probably wondering why is this thing called Samurai Champloo? I probably answered and you're like, Samurai Shampoo, what is that? And no, but Champloo.
So when we aforementioned anachronisms. So that's what you're talking about. You're talking about the eyebrow piercing. You're talking about the use of hip hop music, break dancing.
Right.
What were there other ones that?
I would say there's several. Like I think for most people, it's like they make some of the history pieces like connected to their story, like. Who, because of her being nude for an ukiyo-e painting, started the
inspired Van Gogh.
Right, inspired Van Gogh. Like, yeah, that's anachronistic. An anime character that some guy made up in 2004 did not.
By the way, that entire episode works without that 30-second thing.
Right.
It was kind of like a self-filleting moment for the show to be like, oh yes, the Japanese inspired Van Gogh, and you're like. You don't really need that for the rest of the show to play out. But
it's like when one of our favorite movies out there, Kickboxer, where Jean-Claude Van Damme has to explain for 30 seconds. You do it better than I do, but like why he has an accent and his brother's got like a New York accent.
Yeah, right. When mommy took you and daddy took me to Belgium, and you're like, oh, so that's how we're explaining away two brothers who have nothing in common from looks to their voice. Okay, yeah. I'll allow it.
It's true. It's basically nothing more than, Van Gogh exists because Fu showed her boobies at some point. So you're welcome. You're welcome, Van Gogh. I think for me, the hip hop is seamless. I think the manner, so this can kind of lead into like the actual music, is that Samurai Champloo was cool because the music was taken from a very specific artist who popularized what is now known as lo-fi hip hop. And so to give you an idea, his name is Nujabes, and that's just his name, Seba Jun, spelled backwards. So Nujabes inspired this idea of lo-fi hip hop, which was take a very basic slow beat. So like it's like what do they call it? Boots and pants, like boots and pants and boots and pants. The boots and pants beat, they call it. And then you take it, and then over that you put in old-fashioned jazz, old-fashioned samples from like singers from the 50s, 40s, and 50s, and then you just repeat it. It's not dynamic at all. It doesn't have verses and chorus generally. It's just, you just sit in it, just kind of like a nice river that you.
Now, when you assigned this to me, you specifically called out. You said, "Hey, listen to some Nujabes. You know, just go find a few things, listen to 15 minutes of it, and check it out." And I did, and I was actually looking to some of the comments, and someone wrote something that like really struck me. Now, I don't think that this works if you live in certain areas, but if you've ever lived in New York, if you've ever lived in Chicago, if you've ever lived in a major city where like commuting and walking is a part of your day, not like drive to a parking lot and go walk into your job, nothing wrong with that, but Nujabes and lo-fi is sort of like the soundtrack of your life. Like you can imagine having your headphones on and walking through New York City or walking through Austin or walking through Miami or whatever, and just everything's going on around you and there's no sound associated with it, but you're hearing boots and pants and boots and pants and boots and pants. Yeah, it was incredible. Like, I could go to sleep to it.
I study to it. I go to work to Nujabes. Nujabes is still a part of my. That's how like influential it is. I still.
R.I.P. By the way.
R.I.P. Nujabes. What like? Taken from us way too soon. But also, you know what? I really respect Nujabes. Nujabes didn't take the blackness out of it either. He invited all local, all American black artists that were like, really good rappers at the time that like weren't getting like a real leg up and he brought them over and he had them rap on it. So he's like, if I'm going to have rappers on it, they're going to be Japanese or they're going to be black. And I'm not removing that from the equation. And nowadays, and I think fitting the zeitgeist, like, and I know this is not a music podcast, but I think it's just important to say like why it resonates with people so much is just like you said, it's the soundtrack of your life, because I feel like Gen Z Zoomers out there and millennials are so stressed out and everything's going so fast and it's coming at you full speed that like a lot of music's very like, it's like taking like a Benzie and just going to sleep. Like that's why Post Malone is so famous, right? Like Post Malone is like slow and depressing. People need some music to actually be more slow and slow things down and chill because our lives are just so hectic. So I think now more than ever, Nujabes is more appreciated because he inspired that idea of the slower, less dynamic piece. So.
I'll give you Nujabes, but I don't need Post Malone's poor Nirvana impression on my radio.
Yeah, he's gone a little bit weirdly on like the pop side, and I don't know how to take it because it's weird to like think that like a pop star can have tattoos under his eyelids and like a grill and look like he does.
The only thing is I forget the name of the song, but
Circles, and it's terrible.
Was that the one where he says it was just the sex though? I don't remember if that's
the I think so. I think he's in that.
But my wife and I sit in the car, and when it comes on, we think like he's saying sex boat. So we're like driving like on a 3-hour car ride. We're just sitting there like, oh yeah, we're gonna have our parents over this weekend. Oh yeah, should we invite our brother? Yeah. Sex boat.
Or maybe he's saying talk about the Montreal Expos. I don't know. It could be anything. He could be saying.
Yeah. So anyway, so Nujabes just acts like this really fantastic background that they splash their story across, and so it was. It just gave it a cool vibe, man.
Gave it a cool vibe. So I'm gonna give you some really some song moments that really stuck to me. Like one was the music when I think his name was Oni Kawada, who was like the ugly guy who like was like food because she paid attention. Like so he's like, I think it was episode 2 when he died and he finally found that someone like appreciated him and like the fireflies flew by and then Silver Morning was playing in the background. I remember just being like, that's rad. Barely anything is happening. A guy is dying with his eyes slowly closing. Fireflies are flowing over his face, and this like beautiful, like just like soft like is playing. And I wouldn't see that in other anime. Like if it was a normal anime that you see out there, someone would be like, "I'll never leave you," and it's like, and like it would like go, it like pan out until like feathers would fly out in the side, and then like
soaring orchestra that's too big for the moment would come in.
And they'd be like, nerd. And it would be so much bigger because they want you to like emphatically be like, ah!
Right.
Ah! So
I think the key to even the violence, because there's copious amounts of violence, but I think the word to describe Samurai Champloo's style to everything is understated.
Right.
Everything is just cool.
Yeah. Like as you said, and I don't want to bring up Kurosawa because I know you're going to sing one week when I do, but it's very Kurosawa where like
he makes
the violence happens, everybody stops, and then the blood goes all over the place. Like you could see like he also takes like a lot of like different cues from like Kurosawa movies and like that very cool essence. Like as you said, the violence is very subdued, so it's not like stylized in any way, shape, or form. But let's get into also like the dynamics between the characters as well, because going back to the show, what you'll notice is that Mugen and Jin are very perfect, like dichotomous roles from each other. So Mugen is always represented as red, and he's always represented with fire. And generally with roosters, because weirdly enough, like roosters are associated with fire as well.
So Jin is always wearing blue.
He's always wearing blue. He's associated with water, and a lot of times associated with fish. So he's always like near water. He's always got fish themes next to him.
Also, Mugen has like that big wilder hair, whereas Jin is like back. And he actually wears glasses.
Glasses, right. So think about that. It's like they're like what they're trying to like point with this is that they're two different men that are very different in characteristics, but they can still respect each other. And I thought that was a really cool juxtaposition they had with that too, because I think Mugen, as you would notice, because you mentioned a few lines that he had, can't read. That's another thing you'll learn. He's what you'll learn later in the series is that he's actually born from like a pirate group, like back in the day, like from like an island part of like smaller islands. I know Japan is kind of series of islands, but like a smaller island area. He's like can't read. He's illiterate. A lot of his style's very flagrant and like vicious and wild, and doesn't have really any skill to it, but he's good at it. And then Jin is he does like EIE. He's very quick and clean, and everything's subdued. He actually is a samurai. He comes from a famous dojo, that kind of stuff. And so I thought, I don't know if any of that stuff kind of caught your attention as well.
Well, the red and the blue, the hair, the attitudes, I got all that. Didn't get the fish and the rooster.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. And then you've got Fu, who's just sort of this always getting into trouble. But well, here's another thing. As wild as Mugen is, as to how disciplined Jin is, they made a promise that they would help her on this quest, and honor still means everything.
Right, exactly. And
if you're a wild man, your word is your bond.
Right, exactly. So this is kind of like the big thing that I was hoping that we could talk about is like how much Japanness do you think that you were able to pick up out of this? Because I feel like this show more than anything is very Japan. It's very Japan. Like it's unabashedly Japan. And so I was just wondering, like, did you like take in like how the money, like what the money looked like? The coins were very funny. Did you?
Yeah. So the coins look like old school subway tokens where it's like a hole in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the money that even blew me away, because I've actually seen money like that, or I've seen subway tokens like that. But the more expensive money, I'm not gonna call them dollars because they weren't dollars, and they were
Rio. Yeah.
They look like little oval gold bars.
Yeah. And then, or like you got to see like how the brothels looked like that they basically put the women in like cages and stuff like that. And then like also you got to notice like how art was portrayed. Like I love it, like because I think where I want to lead to now is like your favorite moments from the show. One of my favorite moments was Jin dressing up as a woman, and then the guy goes to the brothel so he can break out Fu, and the the Yakuza's teacher, and he's like, play something for me, pretty lady, and he just like looks at him with that dumb Jin face of his, and he's like goes blah blah blah. It just gacks everybody after that. Like I love that scene so much because how bad he played the guitar there. And then he puts it down and explodes because there's grenades inside. I just thought that was so rad.
A couple things. One thing that they love to do in anime, this wasn't a favorite moment, but they love to make the characters eat with abandon as if they'll never be full. And in the first 6 episodes, they do that like at least 6 times. Like one, they actually start an episode with the equivalent of the Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
Right.
They're eating eel and rice.
Yeah.
But there's always like skewers with big honking pieces of meat on it that they
Right.
one bite. I always get freaking hungry when I
Right.
watch it.
Right. I think the funny thing is they, no matter what protagonist you're going to be in anime, usually they're going to eat like a crazy person and eat more than any human should. I don't know. It's a weird trait. I think since Goku from Dragon Ball Z, every main character does that now. I just think that's just a thing that happens. But like, also it goes with the Cowboy Bebop theme of like, these guys are so talented and very capable and stuff, but yet they will never have any money on them.
Right. So in terms of actual favorite moments, I'm going to give away.
Spoiler alert. So we'll just label it here. Spoiler alert for the first 6
Spoiler alert for episode 4, which is tied to episode 3.
Good. Okay. Yeah.
So episode 3 sees them travel to a new town that is run by this old Yakuza family. Right. But it's run in like a very, I don't want to say casual, but a very respectful way. Like actually taking it to mean that we're your gang, but we also support the community.
Right.
Kind of like how Pablo Escobar was a really bad guy, but he built hospitals with his coke billions, you know? So there's this new character who comes into town, and he's just diabolical and evil through and through, and he wants to take out the old Yakuza gang, either through politics, by force, by money, whatever it is. So one of the old family's bodyguards, you don't see this, but in the past, he's left them and he goes to this new guy.
Right.
And you're just introduced to him as this sort of bad mofo.
Like the enforcer of the group.
The enforcer, right?
Yeah.
So eventually this guy, through a series of events, hires the new baddie, hires Mugen, and this enforcer gets like really upset because he's supposed to be the enforcer. But at the end, he comes full circle and he realizes what he's done, that he left a family that, while they were a crime syndicate, they were a family and they really cared about the townspeople.
Yeah.
Whereas the new person he went with was just terrible from the start. So he turns on that guy. I think he kills him to start it off.
Oh yeah, he just straight up guts him. Yeah.
But he's asked to come back to the original family. You've seen the error of your ways.
Yeah.
And he says, I will only join you when, my honor has been restored. And he ends up dying, fighting Mugen.
Yeah.
And he doesn't fight Mugen because he's necessarily, I know it's weird to say he's not fighting him because he's trying to kill him, but he's trying to fight him for his honor.
Right.
And he dies. So he loses. But the character is redeemed. And I really dug that.
And it didn't end with him like writhing in pain, but like sitting peacefully with his sword on his shoulder
because he found peace.
Right. And then with Nujabes, of course, that boots and pants in the background, just like making you feel all good about it. I love it. That's how a lot of Samurai Champloo episodes end. It doesn't end with like these really crazy moments. It ends with just
quiet,
sitting in it. And then you get to that like ending theme song, like like I also think like just to be very clear, the opening theme gets me hyped every time. I love Battle Cry. I just think that song's amazing. But one of my favorite moments, and I love bringing up this episode because I want to know what you thought about it, was episode 6. And I'm glad you went to episode 6 because I was like, I wonder when he's going to get to the Dutch guy. This episode, I hadn't watched it in years. And it was to kind of give you this idea that like each episode points out a really important part about Japanese history in a different way. So that episode that you watched. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, so we bring it to episode 6. That's the one that starts with the Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
Right, exactly. With the eel and rice bowl.
And a stranger from out of town with a huge Raiden-esque hat on.
I walked into Japan and started the contest and said I was Japanese.
He wins, and immediately after he wins, he like takes off his hat and he kind of like. So a part of the contest was he won all the belongings people put in. So he got Jin and Mugen's swords. So they're hanging out with this guy because they get their freaking swords back.
Right.
But I love that they're like, you talk kind of funny. You have blue eyes. Is that red hair? And he's like, no. I am from Japan.
And I love it because you can hear like what a Japanese voice actor's impression of a foreigner would be. So he's like very like arigato. Nihonjin desu. Like there's a lot of that. I love when that happens. I love it. It's just like mwah. It's like, yes, that's what we sound like. I love it, Japanese people. That's exactly what we sound like. And even though we're Dutch, English, American, who cares? We all kind of have very strong R's and we're like, arigato. So, but like another important thing about that is I think each episode introduces an important piece from Edo. So the one episode you were talking about was about how the Yakuza at that time was really more of a community organization than it was a crime family, which is weird to think now, but that's what the mafia was too, was like, we take care of our own in an Italian community. The sixth episode, the episode 4 with Fu getting kidnapped, where she was doing, she was doing the nude modeling, was to bring up ukiyo-e, which to us is like, oh my God, when I go to Japan, I'm going to get a poster of your Hokusai in that great wave of Kanagawa. Oh, it's so beautiful. But back then it was like close to like graphic novels. So it was funny how like, then they were talking about like, look at this pop art, this smut that these young kids like nowadays. They don't like anything. But to us now in like the 2000 new millennium, we're like, oh my God, it's culture, traditional. Back then it was like, look at this smut. And I thought that was cool to bring up like the ukiyo-e, which is like a very important art period. But the number 6 episode I thought was really cool because it talked about the closures of Japan and how they were, for some weird reason, the Dutch were allowed to come to Japan only to this one area, this one small island off the coast of Kyushu called Dejima. Only this one area. So they had exclusive rights to this southern port to go up and trade clocks, machinery. Most of the time it was for guns more than anything. It was so that they could trade their guns.
They were supplying the Japanese guns.
They were supplying the shogunate, the leadership guns, so that for wartime efforts and stuff like that. And it did kind of keep the peace because they'd had rifles, and that was better than samurai swords. And so what we learned about the character, who I'm blanking, the Dutch character, he is like, yeah, I'll only give you back your swords and your belongings if you take me on a tour of Edo. And they're like, we have no idea what's going on. But Jin's like, I need my swords back. It's the soul of the samurai. And he's like nailing everybody to get out of the way. And I love it because it's exactly what I feel like a modern day Weeb would be. It's like, oh my God, look, it's the Kaminari man. And he's like, what? And he's like, because like, obviously he's just like, he's slightly off, but then he just believes that's Japan. Like, Kaminari means lightning and Mon means like gate, but he kept saying man. And he's like, who's the Kaminari man? And he's like, I don't know, that's the wind man. And like they just kind of like were just like riffing on the fact that I was just like said the wrong thing every time. It was just like, oh my God, this is Japan.
but then the show gets like hyper progressive for the age. So they go to what's the actual type of theater? Is it kabuki theater?
Yeah, they do go to a kabuki theater.
They go to a kabuki theater, and something I would have guessed, but he sees the Dutchman sees a woman on stage, and he falls in love, and he says, I must see her. And in the back of my mind, I was like, wait, I seem to remember something about performers before the 1900s all around the world. And sure enough, he gets backstage, and he finds out that it's a man, because only men are allowed to perform, even the female parts.
Right.
But then, in a total twist of where this episode was going, he says, now that I know it's a man, I love it even more. Right. So he's a closeted homosexual who read about parts of Japan's culture and this one particular writer's work about male love.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why he wanted to be assigned to come to Japan, was to see if it was somewhere where he might be accepted. Right. And look, for those out there who are squeamish or weird or whatever, get over it.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
And he also wasn't a caricature of a gay man either. It wasn't like he was walking around like, oh boy, I'm just gonna do this.
Right, which anime does.
Yeah, which anime definitely does.
Yeah, so, but it was really quite touching, and I didn't expect it to go there. I didn't even know why it was there, but I'm happy it was.
Because they wanted to bring up a writer from the Edo period and how homosexuality was considered okay. Much like ancient Greece, it was considered okay. Much like in Sparta, it was considered very much okay. even though they brought up that, you know, gay wasn't okay in 300, it was very much encouraged in the actual Spartan period. So I think for me, it's really, really important because it showed like a really important historical piece, the closure, I think it was called Saisekis, I think is what they called that, or Saikoku is what it's called, means closed country. But this is an important piece, and the reason why it's so memorable to me and why I got closure just from watching it recently. So this is a little bit of a tangent. Remember I told you, I had to watch pirated versions of this. Sorry. You know, cuff me now. I watched a pirated version of Samurai Champloo. I made up for it by watching it legally here in the United States later. So when people pirate it, you have to have any random schmo off the street gets to translate it.
Okay.
So the ending scene where he's on the bridge in Edo and he's saying, you know, one day I'll be accepted. He says in the current episode, he says, one day this country won't be so tight-assed about it. Makes sense, right? They're not going to be prude, not going to be frugal. Right. When I watched it originally, it was such a shocker because the translator wrote, one day this country's going to open up its asshole to me. That's what it said. I'm not kidding you. And it stuck to me. I was like, and then I remember then going, now actually studying Japanese and actually having lived there and now actually seeing a real Japanese person translate it. It said, don't be so tight-assed about it. I was like, oh my God, that makes so much more sense. Because I'm like, you're telling me this guy's just like waiting for Japan's butthole to open so he can just like get in there. Arigato! Like he's gonna do that.
Arigato!
Arigato! It's like the weird homosexual version of like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, like Arigato! So I remember that like something like less than 20 years later, I got closure and found out what the real translation of that was. And I think what's also really cool is that it was good that you got to 6 because 6 became a closure. It said, This is the Edo part of the series.
I'd call it one set piece came to an end and then they move on to the next.
And move on to what's known as the Nagasaki point. So, I think the one thing that's interesting is that you know the tale of like the sunflower samurai, the samurai smells of sunflowers. I remember the entire time I was.
Remind me why she's looking for the samurai who smells like sunflower.
Well, they don't tell you. I don't know how much you want to continue on.
Oh, don't tell me then. I'll get to it. So I shouldn't know by the 6th episode.
Okay, you will not know until like the second to last episode.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that like it's such a very specific title. Like I know samurais are like the fast lightning or like the blue tiger. This one's just like, this guy smells like flowers. And like, how are they going to do that? Like they're going to walk up and be like, like that's what I was imagining. Like, I'm going to look for the samurai who's no, you smell like eel bowl. Were you at that eating contest? So I thought that was such an interesting way to like name a samurai. I was like, this guy reeks of flowers, and as he said, it was good that he brought up the Dutch guy because sunflowers are from Europe, not actually from Japan. So I thought that was a really cool way of doing it. But
he does mention that, yeah,
absolutely. And what's really crazy about Samurai Champloo is that the misadventures are really long. Like when you watch Cowboy Bebop, the main villain is introduced probably by episode 4 or 5. You meet Vicious like part of the way through, and you're like, this is the guy I'm going to fear throughout the entire series, right? He's the guy that they need to beat to end this. You don't really get that until like the second to last episode. It's really like a lot of like the misadventures of Mugen and Jin and Fu. And what's crazy is like they do a baseball game because it's taken around the time of the mid-1800s. So like Japanese people get introduced to because the Europeans open up the country, and now baseball is being taught to them, or Mugen learns how to read and like what comes with that. So it's really cool because like it still follows the friend's journey without getting too crazy about it. And I don't want to say it again because we did this with Cowboy Bebop, but it's very much like Firefly. It's that like, yes, there's a mission, there's a goal, but really at the end of the day, it's like following these people and how they grow as people.
Life is the journey, or the journey is, what is it? Life's a journey, not a destination.
Right, exactly. And I think that's
the journey, man.
So as you kind of go forward and watch this even more, I want you to just be able to be like a nice new job base and just sit in the chair and just like enjoy the misadventures of these guys, because it's not going to really have too much conflict between like main conflict happening until way later. And I thought that was really interesting as well. I also want to share another memory that I had with that you won't remember at all, but I remember it stuck with me. You, me, and a friend of ours that we still hang out with now, that we still kind of meet with weekly. I'm not going to name him loudly, but he's the red-haired friend of ours. We were all in the car, and I remember I was listening to Nujabes, but I also listened to a very specific Nujabes where they had Japanese rappers.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was listening to, because it's part of my playlist, it was my car, right? Because I'm the oldest one of all three of us. And so I remember our mutual friend being like, "This song stinks," and I got so butthurt about it. And I was like, "Why? This is Japanese. I mean, obviously you're not going to understand." He's, "No, I don't like it because it's not good." And I remember like still not forgiving him still to this day, because I'm like, it's just like it's like you're uncultured swine. I know this stuff is really good.
Swine.
I really like this. So I guess some final thoughts before we move forward. What would you say? Would you continue watching this show, and why? Or what are some things that you're hopefully looking forward to? Like, it's just like we did Full Metal Alchemist. What are some mysteries you want to explore? What are some things you hope to discover while you finish this show?
All right. So, I mean, I guess you've shown mostly in the multi-show episodes we've done, you give me stuff that I definitely don't need to continue with.
Right.
But in terms of like the deep dives, you just keep hitting me with the stuff that's worth revisiting.
Right.
Time and time again, which I cannot thank enough. In the beginning, I was kind of upset when I found out that Cowboy Bebop was only 26 episodes, because I'm like, well, I kind of want to binge it. Well, now that I know that there's so many that I want to watch, I'm like, yes, give me your neat little 26 package story.
Seriously.
I will digest it, enjoy it, and carry on.
Because one of these days, I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to introduce you to One Piece, and it's going to be like it's going to be a journey. I'm gonna send you through a tunnel, and I won't see you for 6 solid years, and then you'll be like, "It was so long but glorious. I loved it," like that kind of stuff. But
so I would absolutely watch it again. Things that I'm interested in. One of the first things I said to you is, are Jin and Mugen ever going to actually become friendly and stop this underlying desiring to kill each other? Or I could totally envision, and if I blow the ending for someone, I apologize. I know nothing. I somehow, at one point near the end, see one of them dying and the other one being over him saying, "You can't die. I'm supposed to be the one that kills you."
Right.
And it's not because they actually want to kill him. It's just that they've become so intertwined in their relationship that
they want to know who's better. Right.
Yeah, that you don't want to separate them. They don't want to be separated. They want that, but they also want that question to go on unanswered forever, because they do become friends. I'm moderately interested in who the Sunflower Samurai is. I really just kind of want to see the adventures and constantly see how they play with morality, because what they do is not legal most of the time.
And they're not,
but it's usually moral.
Yeah. Well, they're not really heroes. Like, the only reason why, really the only reason why Mugen eventually saved Fu was because the rival gang was in his way while he was trying to kill Jin. Like, that's the only reason why he ended up being the hero in the end. Like, these guys aren't necessarily, it's much like Cowboy Bebop. Like, they're not heroes. They just are going on a journey, and in whoever counteracts with their morality, they're going to get blown out of the way. So, yeah, I agree with you on that. So what are some other things that you want to see when you watch Samurai Champloo? While you think about that, I forgot to clarify what Champloo meant. So, Samurai Champloo, the word Champloo is a kind of romanization of the word Champloo, which means to mix. So essentially, this title is Samurai Remix. So just want to make sure that was put out there.
There's that little hip hop.
Right, exactly. It's the Samurai Champloo.
Right.
I want to do that more during this episode. I wish I did. It was just like have a little breaks.
You've sort of given us a little bit of insight into Mugen about being like son of pirates and born off in this island. I know Jin is very opposite, comes from a very proper dojo.
Right, exactly.
But I don't know anything beyond that.
Right.
I just think that I have faith in this show, and what I mean by that is I have faith that they're going to entertain me no matter what stories they decide to tell.
Yeah.
Also, and to bring this back, I might have mentioned this in an earlier episode, if you ever go back and watch Star Trek Generations, again, I think I've mentioned this, but they deal with issues 30 years ago that you never thought would be dealt with. So I just think that some of the issues that they've dealt with, or some of the things from Japan's past that they've brought up, are so interesting to go there, because it'd be very easy to just write an anime that people throw fireballs at one another.
Right.
And like, you know, kids go, yeah.
Right.
But to create something that offers you that, but also requires thought and intellectual energy is pretty cool.
And I also think that brings up a really good point to me, because I think even the villains are fleshed out. Like, even people that you're supposed to be like mad at, or the people that
like the Enforcer.
Like the Enforcers.
He wasn't even a lead. He's in 2 episodes of 26. So what's the percentage on that? I can't do math. But
you asked the wrong person, Garrett.
I cared so much about his story.
Right. And then also you care about, like, for example, like, who is this assassin that they charged to kill them? Like, he seemed like such a dunce, but then he all of a sudden is like very, very, you know, are we going to see him again? Like,
wait, is that the assassin that tries to get in, has like a Wild Hogs moment with Jin in the hot springs?
Yes, almost a Wild Hogs moment, and then he brings him to this like bamboo field, and they have this like amazing like crouching tiger, hidden dragon sword fight. And that's another thing, like
while he's flirting with him.
Yes, like, before he was like, in some cases, two male fireflies get together, and you're like, oh boy.
Jin's like, I gotta go.
Yes. Like, I'm the samurai who smells like wiener. Sorry, that was low hanging fruit. So yeah, and I think also the thing is, like, the sword fights are cool. They don't end them too quickly. Like they're really stylized and really cool. So yeah, I hope that you eventually get to a point where you like just appreciate the like we're pausing for a second to have this really cool artistic direction of like sword fight for a second.
Right.
Sometimes we're gonna stop and we're gonna watch the water ripple. It's like when we played Uncharted, yes, and like you stop for a second and you just look at how well the water is made. It's that kind of stuff here. Like, how cool is it to just sit and watch a Shadow of Mugen sitting on a boat while Nujabe is playing at sunset? Like, you just love.
So one thing I'm trying to give this, and it's not been hard, but I'm trying to give this experiment every honest effort. And what I mean by that is, as a society, we are distracted 100% of the time.
Right.
You know, dating back to when the movie Crash came out in 2005, one of our dear friends suggested that I watch it, and I was texting with a girlfriend on my phone the entire time, and he was so furious that I didn't give the movie its proper due.
Yes.
But when I watch the anime that you've been assigning me, I put my phone in another room, or I put it face down, and I sit there and watch the television. Now, that might not seem crazy. Like, some people would be like, yeah, you sit there to watch TV, but for our generation, and certainly for younger than that, no, you're supposed to watch TV, be playing a game, TikToking, and talking to someone else. But I'm just trying to sit there and appreciate that detail. I'm trying to appreciate the ripples in the water.
Right. Yeah. I really appreciate you for giving it that sense of like respect, because then you're kind of seeing it through my eyes as a weeb. Like, with people who really love anime, they love it because it's a very personal thing, right? You take their stories, you take the characters, you take it personally. There's people who really would love for these people to be real in real life, because you can. It's very good at, you can very much put yourself in the place of these journeys and these heroes. And like, when people are brave, you wish you were just that brave. And I think it does lead itself into a lot of like that kind of geek culture of like kind of vicariously living through these fantasy worlds. Anime does a fantastic job of it. But I think, knowing that you've given it a good shot, I still also want you to give me a critical lens, because I know for people that aren't like you, who haven't like probably been experiencing a bunch of anime, maybe this is the first one you've watched. What are some barriers to entry to watching Samurai Champloo?
Well, you know, considering you just told me that the main bad guy doesn't come along until towards the very end, I mean, I wouldn't want to hop in after episode 10, but you could sort of peek your head in and enjoy an episode.
Right.
A lot of them are linked. They do a lot of episodes that are like 2 at a time or to be continued. And barrier to entry. Ooh, it was so good. So what would be a barrier?
Because this is one thing I was wondering. Like, would you say it's to Japan for an American audiences? And I'm more than likely to give Western audiences more credit than a lot of people are willing to give them. Like when you watch Pokemon and they say like an onigiri is a jelly donut because we can't imagine a rice ball, like that kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
I'm willing to give American audiences more credit, but would you say that like it's Japanness, like the amount of like kind of previous understanding of like?
Well, I mean, if you want it to be like yeehaw American, yeah, it's not going to satisfy your desire, but the history and the set pieces are Japanese, but the people and the personalities, it's humanity.
Yeah.
So I think I don't. It's also so good that I mean, I guess if someone didn't dig violence, because there's a really high level of violence.
Yeah.
So if that's not for you, and if someone who loves anime is like, I really like animes about princesses, well,
yeah, it's not that you're not going to get
not
that
for you.
either.
In terms of actual barriers, though, I don't know. I don't want to just give things a pass, but it was also good that I didn't really, I couldn't think of anything that would maybe all the characters, they're like you said, they're not heroes. So maybe if someone wants to watch a show that actually has a hero,
yeah,
that's what they're going to find here. If they want their Superman, there is no Superman. Everything is questionable.
It's very realistic, and there's not going to be a lot of like, if you're into that shonen style, you're not going to get that here.
Right.
Okay, so then let's go end this episode where we normally do, which is we give our Weeb and Noob score once again, to repeat for those who have not watched the show previously or seen, if you heard it on our podcast. We give this score based on two different merits. One is for the Weeb score, which is my score. How would you rate it based on how important it would be to your overall digest of anime? Would you say that like if you had limited shelf space in your library, would this fit on that shelf? For a noob, just like we were just talking about before, are there barriers to entry? Is this something that like could turn you off pretty easily because there's just weird things that happen? For a new audience, like would you give it that score? So for me, I want to give this an 8.5. And I'm going to give it an 8.5, not like much higher, like, Full Metal Alchemist. And because it does tend to drag a little bit, there are some episodes that get a little long in the tooth. There are some episodes that do get a little too slow. And for me personally, I love that. But for someone who might want something a little bit more dynamic, say for like the 4-minute sword fights they have in the middle, you might not be into it. And like there's some that are just silly. Like the baseball episode that you're going to end up watching is just silly. It's fun. It's comedy. And if you don't get that style of Japanese comedy, then it might not be for you. So I ultimately give it like, definitely watch it if you're an anime fan. It's well worth it for the art direction and how Japanese it is, but also just know that you're in for a slower paced show. So Garrett, what do you give it for your noob score?
9.75.
Wow. So this is even higher than Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
Wow. Go elaborate.
So one thing I've learned over the past few years, so Kyle and I used to live together 7-8 years ago. And I wasn't into what I'm about to say then, but one thing I've started to really realize that just inspires me is I love Westerns. And to me, this was like a Japanese set Western.
Right.
And same type of characters, same type of dilemmas, same type of questions. Also, I'm very into, and I don't know anyone who'd say I hate music. There are people in the world who hate music, but Kyle and I and another friend flew to Chicago, and we rented a car and we drove Route 66 out to Los Angeles. And I remember there were particular times when we were in the American Southwest in Arizona and New Mexico, and the sun was coming down and the sky was this explosive shade of purple. And the soundtrack in the car in those moments was really important to set the vibe. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation. Often we're tired because of what's going on earlier in the day. And that music just, it has to be right and it has to speak to you. And the soundtrack behind this is something that I don't think a lot of other animes that I've watched, nor that I'll come across in the future, really can hold the torch to.
Right.
In terms of how they fit it. I'm not going to be, I'm going to actually dial that back. I'm not going to give quarter points. I'm just going to say it's a 9.5 because I don't know if there'll ever be anything that's going to be a 10.
Right.
But it's just damn good storytelling.
Really good
And
storytelling.
I, like you, appreciate the slow. There is, and I'm going to go on one more tangent. And
Yeah,
then,
sure, go for it.
There was a 8 or 10 episode show on Netflix called Godless, and it starred Jeff Daniels and a few other people, and it was a Western. And there are numerous scenes where they do a wide shot of the characters riding horses across the plains, and like the camera is from, a mile away, and all you see is a dust trail. But that combined with the music, and I'm just totally wrapped around its finger. So give me the slow pace if that slow pace keeps me engaged.
Right, exactly. I agree with you. It's this is not just a show about the storytelling. It's a show about the aesthetic. It's the show about the culture. It's about the history. It's about all of it all at once, and it mixes it in a really good kind of mix of great stuff. So. So yeah, pretty high scores. I was worried that like I was gonna be like, yeah, it's really good. It's like an 8 or a 9, and then you're gonna be like, Kyle didn't get it. It's too Japanese. I'm gonna give it a 6. So I appreciate us giving it the same amount of respect, and that someone who's new, it wasn't as scary or hands off as I thought it was gonna be. So as we close this episode, I still once again want to hear your thoughts. Is Samurai Champloo something that you watched when it first came out, or something that you saw now in the streaming? Is it something that you appreciate for its aesthetic, or is it something that you might be a little weirded out by? Did you like it for the comedy? Did you like it for the aesthetic? Did you like it for the cool sword fights? Please let us know in the comments below, because we want to keep the conversation going. And not only that, we want to keep the conversation going on our Twitter, which our handle is Weeb_Noob, which you can continue the conversation there. Or you can follow us at our Anchor, on our Spotify, and many of the ways that you can stream your podcast, and as well as our YouTube page. But before we go, I'm going to end it off by just saying, Garrett, thank you for joining me on this journey, and we hope that you all enjoyed it as well when we go back to anime roots again. So, everybody, have a fantastic week.
Take care, y'all.
Please join our hero's journey by pushing that subscribe button.
As always, we want to hear what you think I should watch next. Comment below. We'd love to get a Champloo of your ideas.
Champloo.